Hi folks, and welcome back to Mr. Hines Classics channel. Today you join me for another one of my sanctuary site videos where today I'll be looking at the Athenian Acropolis. Now this is a huge site and there's absolutely loads going on, so my aim today is to give you an overview of the key aspects of the site, and I'll do a few more dedicated videos in the future on key areas like the Parthenon or the Erectheion. So let's just dive straight into it. So Athens is located in this region known as Attica. And the Acropolis is located just below the marketplace. So this is the Agora here, the marketplace, and the Acropolis is to the south down here. The Acropolis is a sanctuary, or becomes a sanctuary, dedicated specifically to the worship of the goddess Athena, and it's built on this tall, high, flat rock. The word Acropolis comes from the Greek akro, which means high, and polis, which means city. And this has been a site that has always been occupied. We have evidence of both Neolithic and Mycenaean settlements here, and it's really easy to see why, because the geographical formation of this rock is obviously quite easy to defend. By the time we get to about 5th century Athens though, the city has developed far around the Acropolis, and as I say, the Acropolis itself then becomes a specific sanctuary dedicated to Athena. Unlike the sanctuaries of Delphi or Olympia, this isn't really a pan-Hellenic site. Though outsiders could come and visit, this was a site that was used to celebrate Athena, and particularly her role as patron deity of the city. Now, I'm actually on the approach up to the Acropolis here, known as the Sacred Way, and it starts in this area in front of the Dipylon Gate, here, in a suburb of Athens known as the Promachos, and this was the area where all the potters would work and make their ceramics. Now, the Sacred Way is actually a pathway that leads out of Athens all the way up to a sanctuary of Demeter, and the Athenians would come here to celebrate something known as the Eleusinian Mysteries, and I'll do more of a video on that later on. But the Athenians would also walk from the Dipylon Gate along the Sacred Way, past the Agora, the marketplace here, and up to the Acropolis as part of a different festival known as the Panathenaia, and I'll say more about the Panathenaia later on in this video. So I'm now walking up to the Acropolis, and I wanted to explain a little bit of the history of the site. So the original sanctuary was destroyed when the Persians invaded Greece between 480 and 479 BC as part of the second Persian invasions. The Athenians left the site in ruins as a reminder of their sacrifice when they abandoned their city and relocated to the nearby island of Salamis in order to take the fight to the Persians by sea. The Greeks eventually win the Persian invasions and pushed the Persians out entirely, but they left the Acropolis in complete devastation as a reminder, as I say, for their sacrifice. It wasn't until later, when the Athenian statesman and general Pericles came on the scene, and he decided that the sanctuary site should be rebuilt and in spectacular fashion around 447 BC as part of his building program known as the Periclean building program. Pericles' justification for this was to glorify Athena, their patron deity, and show the rest of the Greek world what the Athenians were all about, and so he spares no expense at getting to work on this. Some of the major architects that were involved in the work on the Acropolis were Callicrates, Ictinus, and Meniscles, alongside the famous sculptor Phidias. The trouble is, Pericles uses money from other city-states that were donating to something called the Delian League. Now, this money and the League was technically meant to strengthen the navy and defend Greece against a future Persian threat. But as Athens effectively ran the League and even moved the treasury to Athens in 454 BC, it effectively was the League, and it sort of becomes the Athenian Empire. Pericles justifies the use of the League's money by saying that Athens deserved to rebuild after sacrificing its city when relocating to Salamis, and the fact that this is meant to glorify and honour Athena is also a strong argument. I mean, who can argue with such a pious cause, right? But the level of expense that the Athenians went to was seen as excessive, and this is one of the causes of the Peloponnesian War, which of course this game is set against the backdrop of. So the first building that you properly come to on your way up the Acropolis here is the monumental gateway known as the Propylaea. Now, there's always been a gateway here going back to the Mycenaean period, but not one of this nature and size. And this is one of the first things that's kicked off during the Periclean building program. The architect of this gateway was Meniscles, who actually had to change his original design. You see, the Acropolis is, as I said, tall flat rock that we're building on, so we're limited by the space available. So it's a little bit off-centre and asymmetrical and not as uniform as I think Meniscles would have wanted it, but he had to work with the space that he had available. Now, this was a grand entrance built entirely out of marble, and it's the main gateway that visitors would come through during the Panathenaia, that all-Athenian festival. And so the high point of the Panathenaic festival is this huge procession where animals used for sacrifice, priests, priestesses, dignitaries, all these people are coming on in this triumphal procession, as I say, from the Dipylon Gate all the way through here. So we have these wide areas between the columns that people could all process through. So it's a space that's fitting for its purpose. There's also rooms in this gateway located here on the right and to the left here that were used to store important and sacred items, but also works of art as well. And I think there was also feasts and banquets that would take place here to entertain guests. So from the Propylaea, the rest of the layout of the sanctuary is determined. Everything is built on lines of sight from that point of where I was standing. You have the major temple of the Erectheion, which I'll discuss more of in a moment, over here on the left. You have the Parthenon dedicated to Athena over here on the right, and you have this monumental statue to Athena, known as the statue of Athena Promachos, right in front of you. And from this aerial view, if you were to draw a line from the Propylaea to the Erectheion, from the Erectheion to the Parthenon, and from the Parthenon back to the Propylaea, you actually draw a triangle. And that's one of Athena's more rudimentary sort of signs and symbols. It's also worth noting that the Parthenon is approached from behind. So this is the back of the Parthenon as we see it here. And there's a sense of like adding suspense to your journey. You see the Parthenon from the back and you're invited to walk around it and then see the entranceway. And as you walk around, you take in all the sculpture and decoration of the site as well. There's an excellent video on the architecture of the Acropolis that I'll link in the description below that goes into all of the fascinating geometry and architectural refinements that take place in the site. So now let's talk about this huge statue of Athena. This is known as the statue of Athena Promachos. And Promachos means like from the front line. So this is the statue of Athena from the front line. It's a colossal bronze statue that was commissioned and sculpted by Phidias. It's nearly 9 meters tall. And it shows Athena here in all her finery with her breastplate known as the Aegis, her spear and her helmet, definitely focusing on her role as a goddess of wisdom and warfare. And of course, we can see from up here the rest of the site quite nicely. So we have the Parthenon in the backdrop there and the Erectheion, both of which I'll talk about more in a moment. But of course, have to jump off the top of it. So the first major temple we come to is one of the most extraordinary in the Greek world, the Erectheion. And this was constructed over many years and built over time and time again. I think the ruins that you see now date somewhere to about, I think, 421 BC, but there's always been some sort of structure at this site. Now, allegedly, it's possibly Meniscles, that the same guy who designed the Propylaea, that designed the layout of this, but I'm not 100% sure that's right. But the reason why it's so extraordinary is because it's such a strange design. It has 2 central rooms, naos, but also 2 porches on the north and south side. It's built on different levels. I think I'll talk about some of the decoration in the moment, but you have a naos here that's dedicated to Poseidon, and then another naos up at the top that would house a statue of Athena here. Now the game goes into this sort of like marble and gold statue here, but really I think the statue that was in here, the statue of Athena Promachos, was actually a small wooden olive wood statue, very humble compared to what you're seeing here in the game. So it honours two gods, Poseidon and Athena. Now I know we're in Athena's sanctuary here, but Poseidon certainly has a role to play. You see, the reason for this multiple deity in part of the mythology is due to the Patronage Contest of Athens. So both Poseidon and Athena were vying for this city as themselves. Athena offers an olive wood statue to the Athenians and says, take me for your patron deity. And Poseidon offers a spring, but it's of salt water. And so the Athenians choose olives as they can eat those and farm those. And so Athena wins and thus gives this area, this city, the name Athens. So the temple, or this part of the Acropolis, houses an olive wood tree, and this is allegedly the tree that Athena offers. And the salt spring is apparently inside, or the rock actually that Poseidon hits with this trident that the salt spring comes from is apparently in the Erectheion as well. Part of the remarkable decoration is this south porch that has these caryatid maidens that hold up the roof of the porch rather than normal columns that you would expect to see, and that's quite an unusual decorative feature. In my video on Delphi we saw the caryatid maidens on the Siphonian treasury as well. But so far none of this explains why it's called the Erectheion. You would think it would have a name that is more associated with Poseidon or with Athena, but it's actually named after the legendary Athenian king Erectheion, who refounded the polis. The Athenians considered themselves sons of Erectheion, so hence the name of the temple. It was also known to house like all sorts of weird and wonderful things, almost becoming like a museum of like Athenian mythological history. So as I said, we have this the rock that Poseidon hits for the salt spring to come out of, and we have other things as well, like the bones of Kirkops, their legendary snake, half snake sort of king that they have, and lots of other things as well. The olive wood statue that I mentioned here allegedly sort of fell from the sky one day as a signal from Athena that this should be her site and worshipped. But lots of sort of interesting mythology surrounding this site. I'm stood now on the altar of the Acropolis. This was the main central altar, where we have where this focuses the main amount of worship during the Panathenaia. So the Panathenaia is a festival that took place every year, and it was dedicated to Athena in her role as patron deity. The olive wood statue that is in the Erectheion over there is the statue of Athena Promachos, and Promachos means city, so Athena of the city. So every year there's the Panathenaic festival. Every 4 years there's a bigger version, an 8-day version that would take place. And days 1 to 5 have all sorts of events that take place, such as poetry competitions known as Rhapsody. You have musical contests and all sorts of athletic events. And members from all over Athens and the wider area of Attica were invited to take place. They were split into what's known as tribes or demes. Day 5 was specifically dedicated to different tribes and areas competing against one another. And all of the events, be it the poetry events or the athletic events, were all in honour of Athena, but helped the Athenians show off how strong and capable its people were. Day 6 is the main religious day, and that's where you have the procession that comes through the Propylaea, and a huge sacrifice of 100 oxen known as a hecatomb sacrifice. And this sacrifice would take place at this altar here. They'd also bring with them this massive saffron robe known as a peplos that would dress the statue of Athena that's actually housed in this temple, the Parthenon, that we'll see a little in a little while. During the normal Panathenaia, it's the statue of Athena Promachos that's draped in a peplos, but in the Great Panathenaia, it's all to do with the Chryselephantine statue in here. Later on in the Panathenaia, on day 7 we have horse events, which involve, one of the events involves people jumping on and off a moving horse, and also a boat race. And the final day was the prize giving, where victors would receive what's known as a Panathenaic amphora, which is a vase that on one side shows the event that they were competing in, and on the other side a picture of Athena. So I'm stood at the major focal point of the entire sanctuary, which is of course the Parthenon. And this is the largest and most ornate temple in the Greek world. It was built out to the Temple of Zeus at Olympia. It was constructed between 447 and 432 BC and made entirely out of marble. Both Ictinus and Chilocrates are the architects responsible for the design here, and the famous sculptor Phidias oversaw the decoration both internally and externally. It's a huge temple. It's 70 by 30 meters in dimension. And it's what we know as a Doric temple, but with Ionic features. And I'll explain those terms Doric and Ionic now. So a Doric temple has these large, thick, heavy-set columns that don't have the Ionic sort of scrolls at the top here. They just have a flat base that I'm hanging off now. And the other major feature of a Doric temple, perhaps a more obvious feature of a Doric temple, is this band of decoration is not a continuous frieze that's sculpted. You see that on Ionic temples, but rather these square slabs that are sculpted, known as metopes, and they're broken up by these spaces known as triglyphs. Now, the decoration on the Parthenon is quite famous. The south side metopes survived best to us, and it would show the myth of the centaurs fighting against the Lapiths. Other sides would show the Trojan War, or the Greeks fighting against the Amazonians, and the gods fighting against the giants. But I'll talk more about the decoration of the Parthenon later on in another video. I do just want to draw attention to the fact that, as I said, it's Doric with Ionic features. The Ionic features would be that it would have a continuous frieze, not obviously where we saw those metopes there, but actually inside this porchway running along all four sides. So we have this continuous frieze that would show the Panathenaic procession that I was talking about earlier in the game. The game does depict it here, but it's painted and it's quite repetitive. It doesn't show it as it actually would have been, whereas the real thing would have been sculpted out of marble right up there, going around the whole temple. And it's a real demonstration of craftsmanship, and to an extent as well expense, that's gone into the Parthenon, because it's not something that's obvious. It's something that you have to come in the porchway here, the pronaos, and look up and see it and sort of take it in there. So it's not an obvious decorative feature, but one that would have been hugely expensive and a huge amount of craftsmanship and detail went into. Climbing back up the temple, we have pediments on both sides. Now the pediments are these triangular spaces here that were again decorated to show different scenes. Here on the east side, which is above the entranceway, you'd have the birth of Athena. And on the west side, so going over here, you have the Patronage Contest that I was describing earlier between Athena and Poseidon. The birth of Athena is where we get the name Parthenon from. See, she's seen as the virgin goddess because Athena was born fully formed from Zeus's head when Zeus ate Athena's mother Metis as a fly, and then had a headache, and out sprung from his head Athena fully formed. So she's seen to have a virgin birth, and in Greek that's known as Parthenos. So she's Athena Parthenos. That's what this temple is celebrating, just her existence as the virgin goddess, and that's what the statue inside the temple is celebrating, Athena Parthenos. So I want to show that colossal statue of Athena that Phidias constructed. It doesn't survive to us. much like the statue of Athena Promachos, and much like the statue of Zeus in the Temple of Zeus at Olympia. These colossal statues often don't make it. And it's because they're these huge, great big things made out of gold and ivory. And so they're a huge display of wealth. And I think over time they get sort of melted down and used for other things. And, you know, other religions sort of taking over these sites use them for various different things. But, as I say, we have this huge gold and ivory statue of Athena. This is called Chryselephantine. And we have in her hand over here on the right the personification of victory, Nike. And again, we have her with a shield, a breastplate, and a spear as well, to really sort of show her off in all of her glory. So, that's pretty much the Parthenon. As we walk alongside now on the sort of southern side, or facing the southern side, you can see all over the rest of Athens and beyond down to the sea there. And you can see just as I'm walking past the Theatre of Dionysus. Now this another Athenian festival, the City Dionysia, took place here, which was a dramatic festival where all sorts of plays, comedies, tragedies and satyr plays took place. This was dramatic competition, and people again from all over the Greek world would come here to view this. I've got an old video on the Theatre of Dionysus actually, but I might do something a bit more on tragedy located there in another video in the future. It's also worth just pointing out in this location here, so as we look on this side of the temple, so we're looking at the west side here, we would have had in this pediment that patronage contest between Athena and Poseidon. And if we look then over to our left, you have where the actual patronage contest took place. So again, you have the olive tree of Athena, and the salt spring would be inside the Erectheion there. So it's sort of like the sides of the temple sort of link up with the mythology, the sort of focal points. You stand here, you can see it in artistic form, and where it would have taken place, all that. All of this is purposeful. All of this has got thought going through it, just to show you another level of the craftsmanship that's gone into this. Okay, so the final thing I want to show you is actually back outside the Propylaea, and it's this really small temple here that's dedicated again to Athena, but with the epithet Nike. So this is the temple to Athena Nike meaning victory, not just do it. So this is a small Ionic temple that would have actually only been accessible by going around the Propylaea, or actually through the Propylaea on the right hand side here. And it again sort of demonstrates the limitations of the space that we're working with on this flat rock, and we're confined, so we sort of have to build some of the things, you know, in odd locations. Despite its size, it's a hugely ornate temple, again entirely out of marble, Ionic frieze that would have wrapped the whole way around. It's really highly decorated. The frieze would have shown a conference of the gods on one side and a conflict on the other. We have Pausanias, who tells us that the cult statue was a wooden Nike holding a helmet and a pomegranate. There's a sort of barrier that's being built around it. You can sort of just make that out being constructed in the game. There's still construction going on here. That would have been added to minimise the danger of the sheer drop off the side of the Acropolis, and that barrier would have had small reliefs of Nike all around it, and apparently there's around like 50 of them all around the site itself as well. So for such a small site, there's a lot going on in this small temple here. And from this temple here, you get a really nice view of the rest of Athens, going down to the port there. So you have the port of Piraeus down here. You also have the Pnyx, and this is where the assembly would come together to discuss all sorts of political matters. This is where democracy would take place in Athens. And over here on the right, you actually have a law court known as the Areopagus. and this is where cases to do with murder would be heard. It gets its name because Ares was tried here for killing one of Poseidon's sons. So that gives a sort of aetiological link to the name, because it's the Rock of Ares where he was tried. Again, I'll do more videos on these sites later on, and go into some of the more interesting features of the city of Athens, as I say, in another video. So that's pretty much it. The Acropolis is a really extensive site. It's massively important to the Athenians. It's a site that comes up in lots of areas of study, especially GCSE and A-level classical civilization, particularly at OCR. Key questions we could ask about the site are always going to surround like its use and function, anything to do with Athenian identity and propaganda, festivals, customs, and the role of gods, and clearly the idea of Athenian dominance, linking in always with that context of the Persian invasions and the Peloponnesian War. So I hope you find this video useful. As I say, from this lots of other videos will be coming as well, but I'll catch you all in the next one.